Yellow Pikmin are peak Pikmin. There's nothing wrong with these little guys. They got big ears, quite the attitude, but at the core love taking a little dip. Swimming, if you will. But throughout the series, I just have to wonder, what's the point of Yellow Pikmin? Every game seemingly adds, removes, or changes abilities at a whim, and it's just like, what's their goal with this type? And how do we use it for our advantage? Welcome to Dandori Database, a series where I talk about everything I can about the Pikmin games, all to analyze the series' amazing design to help you improve your Dandori output. Last video I talked about the red Pikmin, and if there's anything I wanted to get across there, it's that we need to ditch the mindset of good types and bad types. These games are, for the most part, designed to be optimized, and in these massive puzzle boxes where the fun is in finding the efficient solution, any Pikmin type could wind up being your objectively best option at any moment. The only, and I mean only exception we see happens when the game isn't designed around Dandori, with the red Pikmin from Pikmin 2. If you want to improve at that game, you're better off never using them. And as we get more types of Pikmin with clashing abilities, while we can continue to argue over which types are better or worse, which types need a buff or a nerf, I'm more interested in if these types are successfully used to make a good, fun game. For example, when put in Pikmin 4, Reds are still outclassed and arguably one of the weakest types, but the game uses these downsides to create interesting, actually challenging Dandori-themed puzzles. Beating the Giant's Hearth in a single day is not easy. Moving on to Yellow Pikmin, this type revels in their incredibly specific abilities with incredibly specific uses. Like their most iconic ability, their throw height, is only useful when there are objects high up. How do you judge how good that is? The same is true for all of their abilities. They're only useful when the game gives them their situations. Where do yellows go on a tier list? Well, screw the tier list. This style of design can work for Pikmin. It's just a matter of if the game actually lets these situations show up. So, do they? Well, grab a snack and buckle in and join me for this ride as we figure out what's the point of Yellow Pikmin. Found in the middle of the Forest of Hope, there are two reasons yellows exist. Go high and blow things up. This creates a type that you don't really need a lot of. Like, at all. Now, I said last video that Pikmin 1's type balance is between a type you want and a type you need. Well, I lied. It's actually between a type you want, a type you need, and 20 yellow Pikmin. And the only reason you even need this many yellows is because of their increased throw height. As I said before, this is very much an ability that's useful when the game says it's useful. Unfortunately, this ability is useful a total of 5 times. The Chronos Reactor, Libra, and UV Lamp are all ship parts located on tall ledges that require yellow Pikmin to reach. While these parts would be heavy in any other Pikmin game, in Pikmin 1, they're either in the 3rd lightest weight class, the 2nd lightest weight class, or it's just flat out the lightest part in the whole game. Honestly, a blessing in disguise for that last one. The other two relevant options for the throw height are the automatic gear and Beady Longlegs. Beady Longlegs doesn't need yellows thanks to a Pikmin 1 unique quirk where its body can be weighed down. If you latch reds on during its initial descent, you can keep it low for the entire fight and never need the extra reach. And the automatic gear, while very convenient to use yellows on, was already arguably the easiest part to acquire in the Forest Navel. Just leave 15 of any Pikmin on the stick and this thing will go in. Riveting. While I seem pretty negative towards this ability, the increased throw height is the best thing about Yellow Pikmin. It's just so cool. A mechanic like throw height only even matters in a game like this, and considering throwing is your primary way of interacting with the world, it also becomes one of the most constantly visible abilities in the series. Even when it's not useful in the moment, it's just fun to see yellows reach such absurd heights. When we take the inherent joy of using this ability, plus how logical its uses are, it's not a surprise to see why this is the singular trait yellows keep in every game. And even if it's not used too often in their debut, I'd be hard pressed to call that an issue. In practice, the throw height just acts like yellows' immunity. Except more awesome. Like, if they were immune to picking completely arbitrary hazard, radiation, it would feel so much more boring. Not to mention, we already have blue Pikmin. That's a type entirely defined by the required use cases. If every Pikmin only had these abilities and nothing else, the game would just bog down. That's why red Pikmin's fire immunity only matters in a single area, and yellow Pikmin's throw height only matters for 3 specific ship parts. Within the context of a Dandori focused game, these limited appearances act as caveats you must work into your route. So, to avoid being delegated solely to bring X number of yellows here, they don't just get the single coolest ability of the trio, they also get the second coolest ability of the trio. Yeah, I just called throw height cooler than the ability to use bombs. Fight me. Bomb rocks are an infinitely interesting addition into Pikmin 1. For one thing, being able to give your tiny minions the ability to blow things up will always be hilarious. On the other hand, this is Pikmin 1. Have you seen what the Pikmin do sometimes? A Pikmin 1 Pikmin with an explosive device is like a chimp with a machine gun. To give chimps credit, sometimes when you hand them heavy artillery, they achieve everything you wanted them to. But sometimes, maybe there's a reason you don't want to get a 205 Sniper Monkey.
Guys, we're dying to freaking ceramic!
Bomb rocks allow yellows to do a lot with a little. They're a super number efficient solution to both combat and wall destruction, but they're also really complicated to use well. If you don't get how bombs work, that's understandable. I'm not convinced the yellows know how they work. These things can feel terrible to use sometimes. My advice with these boils down to realizing that it's not always worth it to blow literally everything up. And sometimes an army of reds can also get the job done. But I can't discredit the damage these things do, especially for how few Pikmin they actually require. If you decide to blow up enemies, make sure you end fights early. When dealing with a moving target, things can get real messy or real fast. It's all about aiming your yellow Pikmin properly so they get the memo to actually chuck the bombs instead of doing anything stupid. And if fighting ever gives you problems, don't worry. Walls can't move. Red Pikmin are the best at destroying gates passively, but sometimes you need that wall taken down ASAP. So blow it up! It takes 2 bombs to take down the white wall and 4 bombs for a black wall. Now, even though it's by far the fastest option, you don't need to blow up literally every wall. There's only so many bomb rocks you have available on the stage, and you still need to go out of your way to grab them. Plus, if you don't need to get through that wall as soon as you can, there's nothing wrong with just leaving some Pikmin on it. No. The real fun is with the rock walls. I think they're called reinforced walls. I'm calling them rock walls. There are 3 types of rock walls. One that takes 3 bombs, one that takes 6 bombs, and one that takes 9 bombs. Short tangent, what's up with these wall colors? The 9 bomb one, I get, but I cannot tell the difference between the 3 bomb and 6 bomb. Okay, I can see it when they're put side by side, but they never appear near each other in game, and each area has different lighting. I always just assumed these are the same color and the game hated me. These walls are a huge priority in this game, as the shortcuts they block are often the shortcuts. These 2 walls in the forest navel shave off, at minimum, a minute of carry time for nearly every ship part in the region. So if you don't already break these walls down, you better freaking break these walls down. You can get the 15 bombs needed for these walls by the shoreline, and after they're destroyed, you're left with 15 yellows. Enough to carry the Libra. That has to be intentional, right? The numbers lining up so perfectly like this, that has to be intentional, right? When it comes to destroying rock walls efficiently, you often have to fight against Pikmin 1's jank. Pikmin 1's iconic jank. As you always grab the Pikmin closest to you, it's incredibly easy to stop throwing bomb rocks and instead just chuck a poor, innocent soul directly into the blinding eruption you've caused. This is extra difficult to avoid considering the fact the best way to blow these walls up is to just throw your yellows as fast as you can. Any hesitation, the Pikmin will start running away and not drop their bombs. Aside from just dismissing the other types, I don't have much advice on how to avoid this. Pikmin 1 just kind of be like that sometimes. So overall, the combination of throw height and bomb rocks leads to its height many people refer to as the worst in the game. But that's not really fair, is it? Yeah, you don't need as many of them throughout the adventure, but that doesn't mean yellows aren't any more important. And sure, they're not as generally useful, but when compared to the extreme basicness of reds and blues, yellows have got it going on. Pikmin 1, even with all its jank, established a great baseline for this type. And I'm proud to say, as we venture into Pikmin 2, yellows get better. I might have bashed red Pikmin a little too much last video, but don't worry, yellow Pikmin are freaking awesome in this game. For one thing, not only are they just as expendable, but they're also more strictly required. And once you land the perplexing pool, you can just head directly to them and begin growing their numbers. No detours necessary. Always remember, if you want to grow more yellows while using whites or purples to carry, just throw a yellow onto the object. This is great for avoiding this nonsense as much as you possibly can. When it comes to where you want to use yellows, bomb rocks are now, no longer useful. That's one way to put it. But in place of being a demolition expert, yellow Pikmin have finally gained an elemental immunity. Electricity. Who have seen that one coming? Also, they're still thrown higher. Their electric immunity is a real notable highlight because electricity is pretty definitively one of the most threatening hazards in the game. In short, while fire, water, and poison take a comical amount of time to kill Pikmin, able to be easily stopped with the whistle, electricity... Yeah, but even with this notable threat, I'd be hard pressed to call electricity that big of a deal. For one thing, it's not even terribly common. There are only 2 enemies in the game that can electrocute Pikmin. Anode Beetles and Anode Dweevils. Seriously? We just spammed the word fiery for fire, now we're exclusively using anode for electricity? Similarly to the fire-based enemies, purples are your best choice against these guys. I only fought 1 Anode Dweevil in my last playthrough, but for any Dweevil, purples home in, always stun, and instantly deal substantial damage. For Anode Beetles, you need precise aim to flip them over, but purples' thud flips them from basically anywhere. And while you could then just carry past these things with yellows, similar to what you can do against fiery blowhogs, this isn't really a viable strategy in Pikmin 2. If you're carrying with yellows, then you're not carrying with whites. Anyways, electricity only winds up being prominent because of the generic hazard generator. Yellows do a good job at dealing with these things passively, but with a pinch of patience, swarming the wires works just as well. You already have to wait for them to deactivate if you're gonna pass through, after all. And yeah, messing this up does result in the exact consequence you'd expect, but don't let that deter you. Electricity is incredibly punishing, that's why it's dangerous. But all you gotta do is avoid being punished. That's an important step in getting better at Pikmin 2, and I know you can do it. With just a little bit of patience, you don't always need to resort to yellows for dealing with electricity. Okay, one exception. Electric gates are exactly what they sound like. Pretty basic stuff here, just roadblocks used to either check if you have yellow Pikmin, or act as puzzles about bringing yellow Pikmin to that specific area. Anyways, considering how electricity can be dealt with surprisingly easily, yellow Pikmin actually manage to stay relevant because of their increased throw height. Many overworld treasures are high up, but you can cheese them with purple Pikmin momentum throws, a trick that only works in the GameCube version of the game. While these uses place them on par with Pikmin 1's throw height, caves hold many more spots for them. Of the 14 caves in the game, yellow should be intentionally brought into 5. The Citadel of Spiders, Glutton's Kitchen, Subterranean Complex, Hole of Heroes, and Dream Den. We can also throw in the Bullblack's Kingdom and Shower Room, as these caves are blocked by an electric gate. But you don't really need yellows here, they're not harming your army, and in the name of time, it's better to just take them into the cave than it is to go all the way back and swap them out for something better. But for the 5 caves I actually recommended, yellows are either potentially required due to high treasure spawns, or there are enemies that are actually particularly weak to yellows. In other words, yellow Pikmin are the second best combat type in the game. Yada yada, Spicy Spray makes yellows just as strong as purple Pikmin, but what they lack in their stun, they make up for in their reach. Gatling groinks on towers, beady long legs and manut legs, the occasional swooping snitch bug. While many of these enemies have purple specific weaknesses, yellow Pikmin can often do just as well without needing to wait for an opportunity to attack. And despite this list of optimal enemies being fairly small, these aren't inconsequential foes. When they do show up, they can take substantially more time to fight if your yellow count is lacking. For example, the Titan Dweevil. I didn't bring this thing up yet because, well, it's the final boss. It only appears once, and instead of bringing a mixture of types to take it down, your best bet is just Spicy Sprayed yellow Pikmin. Their throw height allows them to easily reach all the treasures at any moment, which is great because if they're latched on and dealing damage, they're dodging every attack. Not like dodging is even that important, considering the fact they just so happen to be immune to the only insta-kill hazard this thing has. Like, I was poking fun at electricity because a hint of patience is all you really need to deal with it. But look at this! How the frick are you even supposed to dodge this? Well, if you're only using yellows, you don't have to. Instead, whenever the spider decides to turn yellow, that's just a free opportunity to chuck your entire Spicy Sprayed army onto the boss. The Monster Pump is the only attack that can realistically hit outside of the arena, so if you take that down first, you only need to focus on dodging the Flare Cannon and Comedy Bomb. Mostly dodging with the Captain, as you can get stun locked if you're not careful. But no matter what, leaving the Shock Therapist alive just gives you completely free teardowns of the weaponry. If you've ever struggled with the Titan Dweevil, this is how you fight it. When looking at yellows as a whole, I'm actually a really big fan of their implementation here. Pikmin 2 is, of course, not a game specifically designed to be optimized, as seen and discussed with the red Pikmin. With enough improvement, you can just outskill the need for them. If yellows only had their electric immunity, the same would have been true there as well, but they don't. They have their throw height, and there are enemies weak to throw height. There absolutely could have been far more enemies, especially since purples can still cheese a lot of the weirder spots, but at least it's something. Still, yellows remain relevant because of an aspect you simply cannot outskill. An aspect you just don't get if you didn't bring yellows, and I kind of wish more Pikmin type design was like this. Look at the Citadel spiders. This cave is super cool. Its close proximity to your base means you're bound to find it before yellows. You can complete it without yellows, but yellows actually make it easier. In the dev intended context, it's easier because of electricity and beady long legs, but for our purposes, it's faster because of, beady long legs. The actual time save isn't a lot, it could really be more, but I can't deny I love this reality. When improving your ability to complete Pikmin 2, the usefulness of yellows comes not from their electric immunity, which is what most people claim their best trait is, but from their throw height, the most defining aspect of this Pikmin type throughout the series. The aspect that's just fun to see and fun to use and gets to be used in logical context for logical time saves and just... man, I hope this never changes. Guys, I have bad news. Yellows are the third type you find in this little cave. Random note, if you push the boulder when you're plucking, all the sprouts auto-pluck after skipping the cutscene. This is immensely satisfying every time. Anyways, back to the elephant in the room. Gosh darn it, man. We were so close. Now, this isn't to say winged Pikmin completely dominate yellows in height, but yellow specific cases only appear before having winged Pikmin, like the Behemoth Fozbat. just can't be done with winged Pikmin, like the scale puzzle, or are slightly slower with winged Pikmin, like grabbing these 4 bomb rocks. But for a vast majority of situations, objects aren't even placed out of reach for other Pikmin types, and when they are, the ability to literally fly beats being thrown higher. So great, winged Pikmin not only out-combat reds, but out-height yellows. Man, I sure hope they don't outwater blues. Uh-oh. In addition to their throw height, yellows retain their electric immunity. But as I'm sure you know, electricity took a huge hit this game. It's gone from being the most deadly hazard to just not. It can't kill Pikmin, it only stuns them. But while this could be a huge deal, it's really not. I mean, like, if this was Pikmin 2, then yeah, that'd suck. But this is Pikmin 3. Electricity barely shows up, and when it does, it's not to harm your Pikmin. The only enemy that uses this hazard is the bearded amp rat. Finally, a new synonym for anode. The amp rat can charge itself, becoming basically invulnerable to every non-yellow Pikmin. While this seems like a yellow Pikmin situation, you can also just kill the amp rat before it charges. Easy peasy. So instead of being threatening, electricity is basically only used for yellow specific gates. Oh, also, conductivity. They made yellow Pikmin able to conduct wires to light light bulbs and bloom luminous stemples. I love this ability a lot, but ignoring tutorials, the boss fight, and the Plasm Wraith chase, there are only 2 wires in the game. They technically don't even appear in mission mode, but honestly, maybe this is all for the best. I've had too many days end from Pikmin falling through the flowers. Finally, they buffed the digging speed of yellow Pikmin, and they are the fastest type at digging. This simple explanation has an excessively complicated system happening behind the scenes. I'm gonna go on the digging tangent real quick. Bear with me. Pikmin 2 introduced digging, and while every Pikmin digs at the same speed, the amount they dig up is dependent on their attack power. So purples dig twice as much, reds dig 50% more, and everything else digs normally. Yes, the type with a digging ability is technically the slowest at digging. Anyways, Pikmin 3 keeps the same logic, where attack power equals dig power. Whites and wing dig half as much, reds and purples dig 50% more, yellows and blues dig normal amounts. However, thanks to their buff, yellows dig a normal amount at twice the rate, just like a spicy spray would do. So what's funny about this is that it leaves blue Pikmin as the only type to dig at a normal speed. Now, this is pretty funny on its own, but you probably realize I missed a type. Rock Pikmin don't deal damage in a normal way. So what is their attack power? Well, the value used for building sticks, the value used for ramming into enemies, the value used for digging is 20. Rock Pikmin dig just as fast as yellows, making up for their half dig speed by digging twice as much. Yellow Pikmin, a type specifically buffed to be fast at digging, dig just as fast as Rock Pikmin, a type just doing its own thing and manages to dig fast on accident. Incredible. Oh, there appears to be an extra entry on this list. Let's see what, oh. If there's anything you should take away from this part of the video, it's that bomb rocks instantly unbury objects. Most of the time. So I don't think there's a ton that needs to be said on how to use yellows in this game. It's really straightforward. Object on a tall ledge and you don't have winged? Yellows. Electric wall or wire you need to deal with? Yellows. You need to dig? Yellows. Or rocks. Or explosions. So despite these obvious and relatively simple use cases, I really like yellows in this game. When you get into it, they still fill all the rules they did from the start, just in a different, significantly more straightforward way. Enemies that can be defeated by every Pikmin but are especially weak to yellows? Buried objects fill that same purpose. There's a treasure high up, and now you gotta bring enough yellows to grab it? Well, conductive wires can't be cheesed by other types. But above all else, the main point of yellows in this game is to break electric gates. On paper, this is a sad and kind of boring purpose. What, they're meant to just break their specific roadblock and that's it? Not even bomb rocks are able to work? But you know what? Sometimes you don't need to overcomplicate things to make an interesting dynamic. Yellow's breaking walls only they can break was always their point, and it continues to remain true in a way that's interesting to solve. Like, what's behind an electric wall? Is it just some fruit you can grab later? Start breaking it early with incredibly few yellows. Is it stage critical fragments? Pull out a bunch of yellows and break that freaking wall down. Twilight River even mixes in a conductive wire, and that adds an extra layer of thought into how many yellows you should bring for optimization. The importance of these walls for routing puzzles only rings truer if we dive into mission mode. Of the 8 collect treasure stages yellows appear in, 7 of them have electric gates. And sometimes that's all they have. Look at Tropical Forest Remix, which has 1 electric gate and nothing else for yellows. This is one of my favorite mission mode stages. The main point of this level is converting your reds and yellows into white Pikmin for speed, and that electric gate is there to give you a reason to not just instantly chuck yellows into a flower. If that gate wasn't there, this stage would have just never given you yellows in the first place, but thanks to its inclusion, it adds an extra layer you gotta route in. Meanwhile, stages like Silver Lake and Forgotten Cove have electric gates you need to destroy, but also give yellows other important tasks like digging or reaching Baldy Longlegs. Now you need to work in multiple other uses into the route, and once you've finally broken all the electric gates, unburied every fruit, and cleared every ledge, yellows are still a Pikmin. They can carry. Although chances are, once you're out of yellow Pikmin uses, the stage is about to be cleared anyways. Great work! Now do it faster. And once again, we can see how limiting your Pikmin numbers allows outclassed types to still shine in interesting ways. Fortress of Festivity has objects on tall ledges, as well as both yellow and wing Pikmin. But while wings do these tasks far better than yellows, you only have 10 of them, and there's probably better things for them to be doing. This is where yellow Pikmin get a shine, as the only other type capable of collecting these fruits. Yellow Pikmin get their fair share of required and suggested use cases, but when given in the context of going fast, it turns these mechanics from a boring, just bring yellows to the wall, into a more interesting, how many yellows should I bring to the wall? That's the fun of Pikmin to me. That's the fun of routing and optimization, and yellows are just the crowning child of this idea. Thank you, yellow Pikmin. Oh, also, battle enemies? They appear in 5 stages, and they don't do terribly hot there. Like, they can beat Baldy Longlegs the fastest in what's probably one of the worst mission mode stages. These dwarf bullbears in the Fortress of Festivity are pretty high up, but not too high for the other types. So, funnily enough, even in the context of battle enemies, yellow Pikmin's main purpose is to break electric gates. Okay, so I would leave the Pikmin 3 section there, but I gotta talk about this last thing. I don't understand any part of this. This electric gate in the Garden of Hope is the most pointless wall in the entire Pikmin series. Only easily accessible if you built an optional bridge on day 2, this gate guards an entrance to the bottom half of a 2-story cave. On the other side of your base is another electric gate, guarded by 2 fiery blowhogs, which leads to the upper half of the same cave. Now, this seems fine on paper as it presents a choice on which entrance you should take. Except if you enter from the bottom, you have no way of reaching the top. Meanwhile, entering from the top gives you a shortcut to the bottom. Why is this entrance here? And why did they put a gate on it? Next time you play the game, break this wall for me. It's trying its best. When it comes to the most useful trait, yellow Pikmin wielded bomb rocks in Pikmin 1, were thrown higher in Pikmin 2, and were immune to electricity in Pikmin 3. In Pikmin 4, they fixed digging! Every Pikmin now digs at the same normal speed, except for yellows who comparatively dig 4 times faster. That's insane! Like, to match the speed of 20 Pikmin, you only need 5 yellows. And for once, Spicy Spray doesn't change this fact. Even though every Pikmin digs twice as fast when sprayed, double digging isn't enough to beat quadruple digging. Not that it even matters, because unlike the previous games, yellow Pikmin's 4 times multiplier actually doubles to 8. 1 yellow digging at the same speed as 8 anything else. Holy frick. I didn't really go too in-depth on what digging meant for yellow Pikmin last section, so let's do a little digging discussion. Or, I guess you could say let's dig in. Pikmin 3 basically used digging as a way to reward you for using yellow Pikmin on specific objects. See this pocked airhead right here? Bam. Now it's faster to do with yellows. And as such, using yellows on it is fun. It's an incredibly simple implementation, but seeing slow tasks go fast just makes my brain activate. Unfortunately, as we've gone over, we also got the unintended side effect of rock Pikmin doing this job just as well as yellows. Neither one outclasses the other, thankfully, so yellows aren't ever a bad digging option, but you only need to use whatever type is most convenient at that moment. Silver Lake Remix is a notable example, as it's a digging-focused stage with both rock Pikmin and yellow Pikmin, so you have a ton of freedom on how to dig. Moving into Pikmin 4, yellow Pikmin's plethora of weird specific abilities now has to deal with the 3-type limit. Pikmin 3 was able to utilize the yellow uniqueness of electric gates to force specific grounding decisions to add complexity and depth to its efficiency puzzles. But when you can only have 3 types at any given time, the existence of an electric gate now requires yellow Pikmin to constitute a whole third of your army. Now, as I went over last video, being forced to do this isn't actually a bad thing. The fact you need to use reds in the Giant's Hearth is part of the puzzle and gives that area its own Dandori identity. But even when their primary purpose is just to break down specific walls, yellow Pikmin have always strived to be more than a basic type you're forced to use. After all, they've always had abilities that allow them to excel in a field while not being the sole solution. As we've gone over, this was their throw height in 2, digging in 3, in retrospect, bomb rocks in 1. But because of the 3-type limit, if you're going to use a type for their specialty, they better do a good freaking job at it. Once again, you're dedicating a whole third of your army to this. So when you're not forced to pull them out, what do yellow Pikmin bring to the table no other type can? This is why their digging abilities are now comically good. If you're making the conscious decision to dedicate a third of your army to digging, you better dig fast, and sure enough, digging anything becomes near instant with enough yellows. Yellow Pikmin are the de facto digging type. They're a worthwhile consideration anytime you need to dig. So as long as the game provides enough digging locations, yellow Pikmin remain a viable option throughout the adventure. So do these situations show up? The only cave where yellows are a viable, non-required option in is the Kingdom of Beasts. There are a number of buried objects that can be found here, and yellows do their job, but that's it. For every other cave in the game, yellows are only good when they're already a recommended type, because tall ledges and electric gates require them. You know what, let's talk about those a bit. Electricity can now kill Pikmin again, but while fire managed to find a renewed purpose, electricity is even rarer than in Pikmin 3. For crying out loud, they brought back anode beetles, but they're only found in the single sublevel long sightless passage. After this, you'll never be seeing them again, and that's if you even decide to pay them a visit. I don't. I never see anode beetles when I play this game. Instead, when doing this cave, I usually visit the shock cake. This is also the only shock cake in the game, side modes included. But it's not just enemies. The final electric gate shows up in the below grade discotheque, area 3 of 6. Finally, the only electric hazard generators show up in the engulfed castle, a cave you can't even bring yellows into. Electricity is just a non-issue. Thankfully, the throw height sees a lot more use. This is what they're actually required for when yellows are listed as a recommended type. Like, the hero's hideaway is a major area, but instead of being a constant necessity like how Giant's Hearth use reds, the only times you need to use yellows is to grab a picture of some dogs and a couple of macaroons. And while you probably could still use wing Pikmin to grab these treasures as well, the flighty boys have a normal throw height. Add in tweaks to their AI and just really annoying cursor movement, and throwing wing Pikmin at tall objects is actually significantly slower and generally less convenient than using yellows would be. I mean, winged Pikmin still outclass yellows in a number of places, particularly combat, that's not even close, but it's also important to note winged Pikmin are an excessively late game type. A majority of their uses are in the final 2 areas. Comparatively, yellow Pikmin are an excessively early game type, like reds were. They're the 3rd type you find and the 2nd one with an onion. So while I said there is only one non-required cave they should be considered for, they're still useful for the entirety of the Sun-Speckled Terrace and Blossoming Arcadia. Yeah, this is due to a lack of options, but look at this sand pit. It has an electric gate and plenty of buried objects, including one on this tower. This is the most yellow Pikmin spot I've ever seen. But after Serene Shores' overworld, buried treasures just kind of cease to exist. Sure, there's a single Anxious Sprout in Giant's Hearth, but other than that, digging either doesn't show up or it's something that Ochi can't just do himself. According to the wiki, Ochi initially digs with the power of 16 Pikmin, but this can be upgraded to 28 times the power, then 52 times the power, or the equivalent of 4, 7, and 13 yellows. Considering how cheap the digging upgrades are, there is almost no reason not to grab them as soon as you can, which is usually possible right before Serene Shores. Ochi being a backwards dog at digging isn't a surprise, considering he's supposed to be the best at, like, everything, but that's exactly his point. Using Ochi to dig means you don't need to dedicate a full type slot to digging, but sometimes there's just too much stuff. Ochi can't easily dig everything on his own. This is why yellows are relevant in Serene Shores. You can use them to dig a ton of things quickly at the same time, which is both more efficient and frees up Ochi to do something else. This same logic applies for tall ledges. Ochi is capable of knocking treasures off of walls, but throwing yellows is generally much faster. Although this specific situation is far less common than digging. That isn't saying much though, because once we reach the hero's hideaway, the rarity of buried objects means Ochi is enough. After making a comprehensive list and subsequently updating the wiki, there are only 8 buried treasures total in the final 3 areas. For reference, the first 3 areas contain 31 buried treasures. This is the best bit of evidence to show that yellows weren't a type really meant to stick around for long. The 3 type limit heavily restricts the way levels can be designed around forced use cases, so tall ledges or electric gates are only prominent when your options are already limited. This is one of the many negative byproducts of the controversial limit, but I'm just annoyed because they are so close to not screwing this up. They fixed and buffed yellow Pikmin's digging abilities to the point where, like, I kind of love digging now. They unearth objects so quickly that it manages to stay relevant even when compared to Ochi. This is exactly the kind of ability that would be an excellent addition to more locations throughout the game, and it would serve to keep yellows as a viable option at any moment. Like, just pick 2 late game caves that didn't already ask for yellows and bury 3 treasures in each of them. Bam! Now yellows can remain relevant as an option, but you're not screwed over if you didn't bring them. Or you can actively decide to not bring them and create a new route that specifically avoids using yellows because a different type of Pikmin could achieve even further time saves. This is exactly why I think the 3 type limit can actually be a good thing for the game. This kind of decision making is legitimately fun and interesting. Every cave requires specific Pikmin, but never 3 at once. Even when a 3rd type is recommended, there's probably something better you can bring along. Start using type combinations you never thought about, and you might be pleasantly surprised. Unfortunately, outside of Kingdom of Beasts, yellows don't get to be the pleasant surprise, and it's all because the game just ditches digging. Huh? What's that? Tunnels? Subterranean swarm? Oh! Subterranean Swarm Sublevel 4 has a massive shortcut tunnel yellows dig through the fastest. Not only do 30 yellows dig it slightly faster than Ochi, but you gain freedom to use them throughout the sublevel. This is exactly the kind of situation I'm talking about, and this tunnel is legitimately enough to make yellows a potential pick for this cave. But they could do so much more. Again, just bury 2 treasures in other sublevels, and yellows go from a potential consideration to a worthwhile consideration. But wait, there's the tunnel in Hero's Hideaway as well, and Oh, what about the occasional tall ledge? This ice sword has a path to throw Pikmin at it that yellows can bypass. Huh. If you look hard enough, you can create routes with viable uses for whatever type you want. Even if there could have been more work to make these types more regularly viable. This whole thing is just summed up as the digging type digs. Why was there so much to talk about? What is the point of yellow Pikmin? Why was this type created, and how has this evolved throughout the years? Well, yellow Pikmin were made to be thrown high. With only 3 types in the first game, each one was given a very particular specialty. Red's increased combat capabilities made them the best against enemies. Blue's water immunity meant they could access any part of the map. These are simple, identifiable abilities that enhance the time management challenge of the game. And Yellow's? Well, they were added because throw height is fun. Pikmin was created by a bunch of guys just screwing around with different mechanics before trying to wrangle them all together into a cohesive experience. In this context, a type that's thrown higher is just fun to use. A perfect example of intuitive mechanics doing intuitive things. But I'd reckon after they really sunk their teeth into development, throw height just wasn't enough to carry a type. It absolutely could have been, as proved by Pikmin 2, but Pikmin 1 is literally pioneering the series. Hindsight is 2020. Plus, instead of making more unique situations for throw height, it takes a lot less dev time to just make the already existing bomb rocks yellow exclusive. You're likely familiar with these icons of reds and blues wielding bombs, especially since these imply that, at some point during development, every type could blow things up. The resource management wall-busting abilities were originally supposed to be their own independent mechanic, which is what they eventually become in the later games. But because throw height wasn't really amounting to more than bring X number of yellows here, bomb rocks got to be a yellow Pikmin thing. I want to reiterate once again, this type of design is actually able to work, but there's already a Pikmin whose singular purpose is to fill this role. Pikmin 2's core changes completely flipped the script for yellows, making their former tool into a hazard. But with a fresh set of eyes from the start of development, they successfully tapped into some of throw height's potential. Being useful versus a few bosses with niche uses against a handful of enemies is a great step in the right direction, especially since purples infamously dominate Pikmin 2's combat. When there's so many situations with the same exact optimal answer, yellows are a prime candidate to spice things up, but they absolutely could have gone further. Of course, this wasn't the focus of Pikmin 2, and instead, yellows were given an immunity. And no matter what I said before, being immune to a fairly common yet extremely threatening obstacle does actually matter so much to so many people. Using yellows just feels safe, and you can never take that simple joy away. But when the focus goes back to Dandori, maybe throw height could have found resurgence. Let yellows truly fulfill their optional yet optimal capabilities. Well, just like how it's fun to throw Pikmin really high, the ability to fly is also fun. And unfortunately, flight completely beats throw height in any capacity. I believe this was the biggest loss yellow Pikmin could ever have. The reason this type exists is to be thrown high, but the full potential of this ability just never got to be achieved. And as long as winged Pikmin continue to remain prominent, we might never see this dynamic emerge into something truly great. It feels like the more types we get and the more overlapping abilities there are, the more we need to resort to restrictions in order to successfully balance everything. But restrictions aren't a bad thing. After all, mission mode continues to be the best part of the series. But when you can pull out any number of any type at any moment in story mode, being outclassed is a serious blow to usefulness. But clearly, someone recognized something was lost. Someone recognized the optional yet optimal situations yellows were completely robbed of, and thus, they can dig fast. Except they forgot to account for how they implemented digging. But combine this with the commonality of electric gates, and I say you'd have a great compromise for what yellows lost. Fast digging fulfills the same role throw height would have, all while not fully replacing it. Plus, it's just far easier to bury random objects than it is to create new yellow weak enemies. When Pikmin 4 released, it tidied up Yellow's abilities, rebalanced them to fit into the faster-paced gameplay, and then actually added type restrictions into the story. The 3 type limit could have been done significantly better, especially in a casual context, but it also has potential for interesting decision making. Don't get me wrong, it does restrict level design in the way that punishes types with highly specific abilities. The lack of electricity or tall ledges outside of the early game is a perfect example of this. Yellows are usually never needed. But the restriction is also used to create unique challenges. Like, I can't shut up about the Giant's Hearth, I freaking love this area. The 3 type limit truly shines when it forces you to use some types and lets you pick the rest. You have to use reds throughout the entirety of this area. That's the puzzle. But what else do you need? Sure, it recommends blues and rocks, but those are only useful for very specific obstacles. Exclusively running with these will never let you achieve maximum Dandori. Instead, the remaining 7 types are completely at your disposal, and you need to decide which 2 work best right now, whether or not they're required. Yellows are completely capable of being used in the same way as reds here. Throw in a few electric gates and now they're a required basic type. But their digging could let them be so much more. Achieve the true potential of what it means to be optional yet optimal. And the game just doesn't. It barely shows up. The point of Yellow Pikmin is a confusing one that has changed and grown dramatically throughout the years. They were supposed to just be a type with a cool, fun ability, but before the potential finally got to shine, all of it was ripped from their tiny little hands. Ironically enough, they were outclassed in a way they would never be able to reach. All of this has just given me an immense respect for Yellow Pikmin. Even more since the Beady Longlegs video, but they just keep surprising me. All the games needed to do was to give them an environment where they get to flourish, but that just hasn't been happening. And so after all of this talk, it just leaves me thinking, man, this type has big ears. They should have called them ear Pikmin.